Nadine climbed down from the stepladder and waved her swollen hands. She hated hanging curtains. But she couldn't refuse Maureen. Oh, so quickly. I just put the rolls in the oven. Will you wait? I will, Nadine nodded, I'm very hungry. I've been busy all morning. Work is overwhelming. Oh, and I made you come here to change my curtains, Maureen said sadly. Don't worry about it, Nadine replied, it's no trouble, just a busy day. The boss called me in the morning, wants to send me to a conference, then a colleague asked for help. One thing after another. Oh, my dear, the older woman admired, I am so impressed with you. Such a young girl, and an astronomer. Well, technically an astrophysicist, Nadine corrected, it just happened that way. I loved the stars since childhood. My dad and I used to take the telescope out to the field and look at them. I wondered if someone lived up there. Maybe there are people like us, or creatures with green skin and big eyes. That's how my interest grew. It's just tough. Everyone's surprised that I'm an astrophysicist. There aren't many women in this field. You know, male colleagues love explaining things I already know. Like at the last conference, a guy was explaining something to me based on my own paper, using it as a good example. You should have seen his face when I showed him my badge. Oh, you're brilliant. Come sit, Maureen pointed to a chair next to a coffee table. Nadine plopped into the chair, stretched her tired legs, and ran her hand over the table. Maureen's apartment was stunning. Downtown, a huge room, high ceilings. The decor was something any oligarch would envy. Antiques everywhere, which Nadine knew nothing about. Japanese vases, some figurines, paintings. Not just prints on canvas, but real paintings, done in oil. They must be worth a fortune. Do you like it? Maureen asked. The table? Yes, it's beautiful. Very beautiful, Nadine approved, you can't buy something like this now. It's a living thing. Genuine. Maureen sighed sadly. Ah, my father loved things like this, you're right. Genuine. These are made to last for centuries, not just a few years. Now manufacturers build in planned obsolescence, so things don't last long and break. Planned obsolescence. A good term. She wondered if her relationship with Seth had planned obsolescence. It must, very little. A couple of years, not centuries. What kind of durability can you expect in a relationship that started in bed? No dates, no bouquets, no shy first kiss. It's strange it didn't end after one time. What are you thinking about? Maureen asked. Oh, just tired, Nadine stretched. Oh, how are you doing? Nadine, I don't even know where to start. Did something happen? Nadine asked, worried, is your heart hurting? Should I take you to the doctor? You're a good girl, she sighed, but I don't need a doctor, it's something else. I'm embarrassed to ask you, but I have no one else, you know that. You see, my good friend passed away. He lived in Italy, was a very talented photographer, even held exhibitions. I recently got a call, they said Raymond mentioned me in his will, can you imagine? But I can't go, you know, my health. Oh, Maureen, I'm so sorry, Nadine said. We all end up there, the woman shrugged, I've been living with that thought for a long time. Well, sooner or later, I won't be here. All my friends are passing away, and there's nothing to be done about it. But don't look at me like that. When you reach my age, you'll understand what I mean. It's not scary, Nadine, that's how life is. But about the inheritance. Would you like to go to Italy? I'll cover all the expenses. Nadine pondered. She hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. There hadn't been a need since her personal life was non-existent. Her boss would likely let her go, especially if Nadine promised to work diligently on her conference paper during the trip. Can't you go? Maureen asked, Nadine, it's not mandatory, just preferable. No, Nadine drummed her fingers on the tabletop. You know, I think I can. That's wonderful, Maureen beamed. I'm sorry to bother you, but I have no one else to ask. I only have 2 friends left, but they're also old. Alright, I'll call tomorrow and let you know if my boss gives me the time off, Nadine promised. Okay, my dear. I'll go check on the rolls. Maureen rose from her chair, then we'll have tea together. Oh, by the way, I was sorting through my wardrobe. There's a bag by the closet, take a look, maybe you'll find something you like. In the bag, Nadine found a velvet dress, forever imbued with Maureen's perfume, a delicate silk scarf, and a box with an enamel brooch. Maureen was lying, of course. She hadn't been sorting through anything, she just loved giving Nadine her things. And Nadine never took them. Why? It would be better if Maureen sold them, collectors would pay a fortune. But Maureen was sly, knowing Nadine's love for vintage clothes and jewelry. They played this game constantly. Nadine had resigned herself to it and accepted the items, though it pricked her conscience a bit. The dresses and jewelry could be sold, but Maureen didn't want to sell anything. She insisted that all her possessions had a history, and selling that history was a sacrilege. Better they end up with a good person. And Nadine, without a doubt, was the best person for that, at least in Maureen's opinion. And it seemed Maureen didn't need the money. Nadine returned home close to 11 that night, carefully hung the dress in her closet, placed the brooch in her jewelry box, and left the scarf on the couch to admire. Cranes flying against a turquoise background. Such an unusual color. Maureen must have chosen it to match her eyes. Nadine had noticed her eyes at their first meeting. Bright, almost incongruous on such an elderly face. Eyes like those must be 1 in a million. Sighing, Nadine thought the scarf didn't suit her. She lacked the elegance and refinement it required, the kind of special allure. Her mom used to call her a soldier. She took after her father, with broad shoulders, a tall stature, and a short haircut. Nadine disliked long hair, it took too much effort to wash and style. So, she cut it short as soon as she finished school. Her mom cried back then, saying that her hair was the only thing that made Nadine look a bit like a girl. Her appearance had always been a curse. In school, kids teased her, calling her a giraffe, and her mom constantly worried that no one would marry Nadine. And she turned out to be right. At 27, Nadine had never had a serious relationship. Her mom thought it wasn't just her height but also her intelligence, men don't like smart women. And Nadine. Nadine studied to be an astrophysicist and was about to defend her dissertation. According to her mom, this further reduced her chances of finding happiness in marriage. Nadine had no way to comfort her mom. She didn't want to marry the first man she met just to calm her mom down. Honestly, there weren't any first men willing to date her anyway. Maybe her mom was right, and Nadine was destined to be alone. The whole concept of marriage didn't appeal to Nadine. How did it work? You get married to take care of not only yourself but also a man. Men often don't realize that toilets need regular cleaning, that food doesn't magically appear in the fridge and turn into a delicious meal on its own. Cleanliness isn't maintained by a fairy who flies in when no one is home. It's the wife who does the cleaning, cooking, and laundry. It was simpler to live alone and not worry about someone complaining about a forgotten mug with leftover tea by the computer. Although there was Seth. But Nadine didn't consider Seth a potential husband. They met a year ago. Nadine clearly remembered the day she went to a friend's birthday party. She didn't notice Seth initially, not because he wasn't attractive, quite the opposite, he was too handsome. Nadine dismissed such men immediately. Handsome men only love beautiful women, that's the law of nature. Tall, brown-eyed, with a charming mole on his cheek and a captivating smile. Not her type. When the guests started to leave, it turned out that Nadine and Seth were headed in the same direction, and he had a car. He offered to give her a ride home, and Nadine agreed, not expecting that he had any romantic interest in her. In the car, they started talking, and Seth suddenly said that he had been admiring Nadine all evening. "You move gracefully. Like a young tigress," she joked. "No, as if you've been dancing," Seth replied seriously. "No dancing, but basketball, yes. My dad instilled a love for it, he was tall too." "You're beautiful," he smiled, "an astrophysicist, huh? Never met one before." Nadine suddenly felt a pang of resentment. For all women, really. Because if you weren't beautiful, men like Seth were just a dream. "Do you really think I'm beautiful?" she asked, looking at him challengingly. "Yes, very," he nodded. "Then let's get straight to the point," she winked, "we can go to my place, I live alone." He glanced at her in surprise. "Just like that?" "Why not?" she smirked, "we're adults. And I haven't had anyone in a long time." Nadine was sure he'd say he was in a hurry to get home, that he had a lot to do. She had tried this trick with others who flirted with her, and it never went far. At most, there was an awkward promise to call when they had time. And, of course, they never had time. "All right," Seth nodded, "I'd love to. Just need to stop by a pharmacy." Nadine was stunned. How bold. Or maybe he was just curious about what tall girls were like in bed, adding to his collection to tell his friends about later. Men like him usually had no shortage of female attention. With his smile. And the mole on his cheek that Nadine suddenly wanted to touch. There was no turning back. Nadine had never gone to bed with someone on the first date. She hadn't even kissed on the first date before. She was nervous when they reached her apartment door, even dropping her keys. But everything went surprisingly smoothly and pleasantly. It felt like they had known each other for years, understanding each other perfectly. There was no awkwardness, no misunderstanding. Seth was clearly an experienced man. And Nadine found herself liking him. Where did he learn all this? But why did she care? Soon, he would leave and forget her forever. Maybe he'd even promise to call. And, of course, he wouldn't. At breakfast, she learned that he worked as a manager, but his true passion was painting. "My mom insisted I get a proper education," Seth sighed, "she thinks art isn't serious. My mom's a nervous woman, so I had to comply. She was deeply concerned about my future. She needed me to have a financially secure career. But I still paint whenever I have time." "And your dad?" she asked. "He left," Seth shrugged, "before I was born." "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. "It's okay, I don't have any sad feelings about it." "So, what do you do? Besides being an astrophysicist?" Or were the guys joking? They weren't joking, "I am an astrophysicist. I can show you my university ID. And my papers. By the way, I work at the university," she said. Seth nearly choked on his coffee. "You're kidding." "I didn't believe it." "No, seriously," Nadine replied grimly, "I study stars, count stars, write papers about stars." "That's crazy." "Wow, you're smart too." Nadine playfully threw a napkin at him. "What do you mean, too?" He laughed. "A smart and beautiful girl. Looks like I've hit the jackpot." "Don't get any ideas," she said, stirring her coffee, avoiding looking at Seth. He looked quite attractive after a shower, with a towel wrapped around his hips. "Hey, are you free today?" "It's Saturday." "Free," Nadine replied, surprised. "Maybe we can go to the movies. Or order some pizza." They started dating. Nadine didn't ask questions. Maybe he had a girlfriend. Or he was actively looking, or even married. She didn't think about a future together, he was too handsome for her. Let it be as it will, and last as long as it lasts. Nadine was only afraid of one thing, that she'd fall in love with him, and he'd find someone else. It was just a matter of time. Yet, Seth periodically suggested introducing Nadine to his mom. The thought horrified her. She refused. Seth got upset but eventually calmed down. Nadine couldn't understand why he wanted to introduce his mother to a tall, unattractive girl he slept with on the first date. They couldn't have a serious relationship. She was content with what they had. Why did he always want to pretend they had a real romance? So she lived her life. Worked a lot, spent her free time with Seth. Her calm, measured life was interrupted by an accident. She fell on the stairs at the university, tripped over nothing, and broke her ankle. Nadine was taken to the hospital and admitted to the trauma ward. That's where she met Maureen, who had broken her collarbone. They shared a room, and Nadine helped the woman dress and undress, wash up, awkwardly hopping on one leg and risking breaking the other ankle. That's how they became friends. Maureen invited Nadine over after they were discharged. It turns out Maureen lived in a spacious apartment in the city center. Nadine was taken aback. How much must such an apartment cost? Maureen's husband must have been some kind of director or general. Of course, Nadine didn't ask. If Maureen wanted to share, she would do so on her own. Nadine helped the woman as much as she could. She hung curtains, ran around the city looking for the right medicines, and washed the floors. Maureen accepted the help with gratitude and rewarded Nadine with her vintage dresses and jewelry. She also baked delicious buns and pies for her. Nadine felt like she had found a kind and loving grandmother. Of course, she had a grandmother on her father's side, but she was a stern woman who never seemed to smile and always used visits as an opportunity to lecture Nadine about how she would never find a husband unless she changed herself entirely, lost weight, grew her hair, and abandoned her silly, useless science. Nadine couldn't refuse Maureen's request. Her boss easily granted her time off. "Oh, you're flying to Italy?" "No way. Bring me something nice, will you?" "I'll try," Nadine promised. "Just make sure you come back. The conference is soon, and don't forget about your dissertation." That same day after work, Nadine told Seth about her upcoming trip. "Maureen is sending you to Italy," he exclaimed. "Rich old lady." "Well, maybe she is," Nadine shrugged. "What difference does it make to me? Imagine, Seth, I'll see Italy with my own eyes." "Want me to come with you?" he suddenly suggested. "I've always wanted to see what it's like there." "You want to come with me?" Nadine was surprised. "I do." "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Nadine, it seems like you're keeping me at a distance." "Tell me it's just my imagination." "No, no, what are you saying?" She forced a smile. "Seth, it's too soon to plan trips together." "It's the perfect time, Nadine," he assured her. A week later, the plane carried them to Italy. She was nervous, Seth was completely calm. She felt like she had forgotten something. Passport, money, power of attorney, she didn't want to disappoint Maureen, who had already spent so much on this trip or maybe just wanted to give Nadine the opportunity to travel. Raymond, Maureen's friend, lived in a town called Brescia. Nadine was captivated by the city. It seemed like it was made for painting and photography. Even the air felt different. Seth was absolutely delighted. "You say this Raymond was a photographer?" "I can understand that. I'd live here too. You could set up an easel anywhere and start painting." They spent the first day simply walking around the city, admiring the old buildings. Then Nadine got a blister, and Seth had to find a store to buy some band-aids. In the evening, they returned to the hotel and fell asleep as soon as they hit the bed. The next day, Nadine went to the reading of the will. The taxi brought her to Raymond's house. She looked at the house and felt a pang of envy for the deceased. The house was small, almost toy-like, with white walls, tiny windows, and a charming garden. She hesitantly approached the door and pressed the doorbell. A man in his 30s, dressed in a formal suit, opened the door. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said. "Hello." Nadine rummaged through her bag and pulled out the authorization letter. I'm here on behalf of Maureen. Here. Yes, yes, I was informed. I am Francesco Romano, the notary's assistant. Please come in, everyone is already gathering. Francesco led Nadine into a spacious living room. On the couch sat a woman in her 70s, with a short, neat haircut, thin, with sharp features that made her appear stern. Next to her was a man in his 40s, looking almost identical to the woman. Nadine immediately guessed they were mother and son. In an armchair sat a man around Nadine's age, a bit overweight. Please, have a seat. Francesco pointed to one of the free chairs. Well, everyone is here, the elderly woman sighed. He was such a sociable man. And now, he has hardly any real friends left. Father didn't socialize much in his later years, said the man next to the woman. You know, he just photographed and wrote. The woman turned to Nadine. My name is Margaret, this is my son and Raymond's son, Albert. And you? I'm here on behalf of Maureen. She was friends with Raymond, Nadine smiled. But she couldn't come, she's ill, heart problems, the doctors forbade her from flying. Margaret grimaced at this. Maureen. I remember her. Raymond talked about her. Oh, well, it seems he didn't forget her. Why would he? Nadine blurted out. Well, not necessarily. It happens. Raymond was a creative person, you know. They often carry one fateful love through their entire life. Do you understand what I mean? Love? Yes, love, the man spoke up. I'm Vernon. I was friends with Raymond in his later years. I came to Italy to pursue photography and approached him. I was scared, of course. I thought he might turn me away. I was in my early 20s then. But Raymond welcomed me like family, helped me adapt to a new country, and taught me the craft. He was a good man. Nadine asked. Like everyone, Margaret shrugged. We all have a mix of different qualities. There are no purely good or bad people. He was good, very good, Albert said, hugging his mother. In the room appeared the notary, a man in his 50s. The formal part of the event began. Raymond bequeathed the house to his son. Vernon got the photography equipment and a small sum of money. So that you could forget about earning for a while and just improve your skills, without thinking about anything, read the notary. Vernon smiled and discreetly wiped away a tear. The notary looked at Nadine. Maureen receives the letters and all the funds that will be raised at tomorrow's auction. An auction? She exclaimed. The notary nodded at Nadine. Yes, Raymond instructed that some items from his collection be sold at auction, and all the proceeds go to Maureen and her sister, Virginia. Sister? Nadine asked. Yes, sister, the notary showed Nadine the will. That's Raymond's will. The sisters are free to divide the proceeds as they see fit. How generous. Margaret remarked, with evident tones of displeasure in her voice. Raymond had quite a collection, he collected antiques, paintings, vintage photographs, he traveled to all the flea markets in Europe, often stumbling upon real gems. Mom, if Dad wanted it that way, then so be it, Albert gently objected. Margaret pursed her lips. She must have been upset with her late husband. She probably thought everything should have gone to her and her son. It's interesting, what connected Maureen and Raymond? Was it just a simple friendship? What kind of enduring bond did this friendship have? Maureen told Nadine that she and Raymond hadn't seen each other for decades, and yet he decided to leave her and her sister a generous inheritance. And an archive of letters. I wonder what those letters are about. Nadine returned to the hotel. In her room, she collapsed onto the bed and closed her eyes. Well, what's up? Seth asked. Tired? Yeah, she stretched. Tell me, Seth, do you believe in love? He sat down next to her and suddenly stroked her head. Of course, I do. Why, are you asking? Oh, nothing. I'm not particularly convinced, especially about the kind that a person carries their whole life. Love is just hormones, Seth. Well, thanks, he frowned. So, according to you, we're just here because of hormones, Nadine. Well, honestly, yes, Nadine sat up and hugged her knees. I'm still a scientist, you know. But sometimes I wonder if there might be something more. Come on, you. Seth sighed. You're a cynical woman. Let's go, Nadine, it's better to have some coffee. Tomorrow's the auction, and they'll give me the archive for Maureen. Nadine looked at Seth. I'm so curious what's in there. Maybe she'll tell us. Or she'll decide to keep her secrets. Seth hugged Nadine and kissed her on the cheek. You're still a strange one, Nadine. Okay, let's go. I'll treat you to coffee with pastries, he said. The next day, the auction took place, surprisingly drawing a large crowd. Nadine was amazed that people were willing to pay such sums for some obscure photographs, old books, and figurines. And she realized that Maureen seemed to be on her way to becoming a wealthy person. Nadine thought the auction would resemble a clearance sale in a thrift store, but instead, well-dressed and clearly affluent people gathered there. Apparently, Raymond knew his antiques. In the evening, she received from the notary a cardboard box, carelessly sealed with tape. Handle it with care. Raymond cherished it, Francesco said. It seems it was dearer to him than anything else. And here, take the photographs. Francesco handed Nadine a thick album bound in leather. Nadine had a fleeting thought that she would now have to pay for excess baggage weight. The album seemed to weigh a couple of kilos, if not more. And I've transferred the money to your account, the details are in your email, Francesco continued. Thank you and all the best, lovely lady. Not so lovely, Nadine laughed. For some reason, Nadine liked Francesco. Perhaps it was because there was always a smile in his eyes. It happens sometimes. Lips don't smile, but there are playful rays in the eyes. Nadine was always drawn to such people, they seemed particularly warm and kind. Lovely. Francesco frowned. But you don't understand. You are special. I immediately noticed how you move. It's as if you're dancing all the time. I used to play basketball, Nadine replied. A girl like you must have someone. I won't even ask, Francesco winked. It's true, isn't it? Yes, she laughed. Thank you. I should go. I want to see your city. It seems small, but it feels endless. Oh yes, it's magical. The space here is special. It can shrink or expand to show itself in all its glory, Francesco sighed. Oh, how I wish I could see it again with tourist eyes, like 20 years ago. Well, never mind. Good luck to you, beautiful Nadine. For the rest of the week, Nadine and Seth wandered around the city. Just strolling through the streets, holding hands. And for some reason, for the first time in her life, Nadine felt beautiful. Listen, you've changed somehow, Seth noticed one evening. You seem to be smiling more often. You know, Francesco called me beautiful, Nadine smiled. So, you believe in Italian but not my words, Seth said. Okay, Nadine, duly noted. So, if I were a hot Italian, you'd believe me, and you wouldn't turn into a grump every time I try to say something nice to you. Don't be offended, Seth, Nadine gently patted his shoulder. Don't spoil this evening, please. We're leaving tomorrow. When will we find ourselves here again? And please, don't call me a grump, Nadine said. In the hotel that evening, she decided to open the album. It wasn't sealed, so Raymond must have been okay with others seeing these photos. There was nothing special there, just someone's childhood photos. Probably Raymond himself. A student in a plaid shirt, posing near a fountain, with some girl. Young, dressed in 70s fashion, in pants and a shirt, with a scarf on her head. Another girl, resembling the first one, but with a rougher appearance, as if the first one was sculpted by a talented artist, and the second one by his apprentice. Nadine suddenly felt sad. So many pictures, a whole life. Someone's youth, someone's fulfilled and unfulfilled hopes and dreams, someone's long-lost love. It must have been love that was the meaning of existence. And nobody needed it. Raymond must have hoped that Maureen would keep his memory, but she probably wouldn't live much longer on this earth. She was already over 80, with fragile health. And where would this album with photos end up? What if Maureen's heirs simply threw it away? Nadine often saw such old albums by trash bins. It always made her uncomfortable. After all, someone had gone through these photographs, looked at them with warmth, with a smile or tears, arranged them on the album pages, trying to create a complete composition. Nadine decided that if something happened to Maureen, she would definitely take this album for herself and carefully preserve it for her entire life. The next day, Nadine came to Maureen's. "Congratulations," she announced as she entered. "You're a wealthy person." "What do I need this wealth for?" sighed the elderly woman. "Did he give the photos?" "Yes, of course." Nadine opened her bag and handed over the album. "Here." Maureen grabbed the album with her delicate hands, pressed it to her chest, and blissfully closed her eyes. He didn't forget. He didn't forget anything or anyone. Oh, if only I were a bit smarter back then. "Did you love him?" Nadine asked softly. Maureen looked at her thoughtfully and smiled sadly. "Me? I don't think so. But I did a very bad thing, very bad. I regretted it all my life. But there was nothing I could do about it. So, I guess he forgave me." "You didn't mention that you have a sister," Nadine noted, taking off her sneakers. I do. Maureen looked away. "It's a very long story, dear." "Tell me," Nadine suddenly asked. "I love long stories." Maureen smiled, but there was more sorrow than joy in her smile. People carry such sorrow in their hearts for years, and they don't show it to anyone, as if it's some kind of treasure. Bitter, but necessary, making you alive and feeling. Nadine wanted to hug the woman, but she just stood there and watched the old lady, who was lost in memories, gently caressing the leather cover of the photo album. "Let's go," Maureen nodded. "Let's have some tea, and I'll tell you something about Raymond. Just don't judge this old lady, everyone makes mistakes. And when you've lived in this world for a long time, you make more mistakes if you're not a saint." "Ha, I'm not a saint." And Maureen began her story. Mark fell in love with Erica the moment he saw her. Erica came to the botany department as a lab assistant and as the fiancée of Mark's colleague, Andrew. Mark had been friends with Andrew since college. They had agreed in their youth always to be honest with each other. Perhaps their long-standing friendship was built on that. Mark showed honesty this time too. "I'll take her away." "I'm sorry, buddy, but I can't help it." "How do you mean, take her away?" Andrew laughed. "We're getting married. She loves me. I'll take her," said Mark. "And I'm telling you that right now." Andrew didn't believe his friend, but he should have. Mark knew he needed this girl the moment he first noticed Erica. She was extraordinary, with a delicate face, graceful eyebrows, and full lips. And most importantly, extraordinary eyes of the rarest turquoise shade. Mark's heart skipped a beat when she looked at him with those eyes and shyly smiled. Erica felt shy around Mark. He was big, tall, full-bodied, and loud. He was the life of the party. Mark never backed down, which is why he became a professor at 45. He didn't back down in matters of love either. 3 months after Erica joined the department, they got married. Andrew didn't show up at their wedding and later transferred to another university. But Mark felt no remorse. They say male friendship is sacred, yes. But when it comes to a girl with turquoise eyes, friends take a back seat. Mark had never loved anyone like he loved Erica. He never wanted to marry any girl, He believed marriage was a relic of the past, and a smart person would be content with pleasant relationships that didn't involve responsibility. But Erica changed everything, and Mark didn't regret it at all. She moved into Mark's huge apartment and quit her job. He told her he earned enough to support both of them. There were some unpleasant rumors circulating in the department. Many assumed Erica found Mark to be a more promising husband, so she left Andrew. Mark knew about these rumors and didn't want his wife to hear dirty gossip from envious people who didn't know what real love was. When he first brought her to his apartment, Erica stood there with her mouth open. "This is all yours," he laughed. "Ours, of course. But I believe that a home is a woman's territory." Erica ran around the rooms like a child, laughing, hugging Mark, and almost crying with happiness. Mark's apartment seemed like a real palace to her, and he saw in her the Cinderella come true and hoped he wouldn't disappoint her, that he would be her handsome prince, wouldn't let her down, and would give her what she deserved. Mark tried very hard, buying everything Erica asked for: good furniture, curtains, carpets. Erica's word was law for him. If she wanted a particular carpet, then so be it. 2 years later, Maureen, their first daughter, was born. Mark secretly hoped for a son. Although he loved his daughter with all his heart the moment he saw her. She had the exact same eyes as her mother. The same turquoise. Soon after the birth of Maureen, Erica became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder for her than the previous one. Her body was still weak. Erica spent almost all 9 months either at home or in the hospital. Mark was beside himself with worry, searching for the best doctors for his wife. Fortunately, their second daughter, Virginia, was born on time. The birth was difficult. Bringing his wife home, Mark promised that they wouldn't have any more children. "But you wanted a son." Erica looked at her husband. "I remember you talking about it. I want more for everything to be okay with you." Mark hugged his beloved and kissed her. "2 daughters are wonderful, believe me. Although, God knows, I can't imagine how to raise girls." In reality, Mark was a wonderful father, like almost all men who genuinely love their wives. He tried to relieve Erica of worries, bought a washing machine, cooked after work, stayed with the girls so his wife could go to the hairdresser, often called a nanny so he could take his wife out to a restaurant. In general, he did everything to ensure that motherhood did not become a burden for them. He succeeded in this. The girls grew up. And Maureen and Virginia inherited their mother's turquoise eyes. They looked very much alike. Only Maureen was a bit rougher. She lacked the delicacy and gracefulness. She didn't have the nobility in her appearance that the younger Virginia did. Virginia, on the other hand, grew up like a little doll. People admired her from a young age. A real little angel with golden curls, chubby cheeks, and lips shaped like a bow. But Maureen didn't attract as much attention for some reason. The younger one was always noticed first, and only then the older one. They also had different characters. Maureen was collected, attentive, studious. She learned to read early, and her curious mind wouldn't rest until she got to the bottom of things. But Virginia was a real live wire, and books interested her the least in the world. But she loved dresses and dolls. And she could spend hours going through her mother's makeup and perfumes on the dressing table, pretending to be an adult woman doing her hair and makeup. Mark and Erica found it endearing. Growing up to be a little flirt, there would be no shortage of suitors when she grew up. Mark often joked that Maureen inherited his character. She would surely be a scientist, but Virginia would probably be an actress, accustomed to being in the spotlight, enjoying it. Virginia even put on concerts for her parents, wearing her mother's voluminous skirt, a necklace on her head like a crown, and sang songs, holding a comb in her chubby hand. Maureen never participated in these concerts. But she never left her father's side, asking him question after question about how the world was arranged, why the sky was blue and not green, why flowers bloomed in spring and not winter, why fish swim and birds fly, and not the other way around. Virginia, on the other hand, was not interested in these questions. She was only interested in how others saw her. Time passed. The girls went to school. Maureen excelled, and Mark was proud of his daughter. He often joked that she would follow in his footsteps. But Virginia didn't do as well in school. Teachers scolded her for inattentiveness, for being in the clouds. Erica scolded her daughter, saying that without good grades, Virginia wouldn't get into college. But Mark defended the youngest. One day, Maureen overheard a conversation between her parents. It was late at night, she was supposed to be sleeping but wanted a drink and went to the kitchen. But the door was closed. Her parents were talking quietly in the room. Maureen was always curious, so she couldn't miss the opportunity to find out what her mom and dad were discussing at night. Complaining about Virginia again, sighed Erica. Saying she's inattentive in class. Darling, don't worry, why does she need to study? She'll have a diploma, you know I have connections at the university. She'll get into college, believe me, not everyone needs to be an academic. But still. Wait, she has many other virtues, Erica. Sociable, charming, beautiful. She's impossible to look away from. Remember when Karen from the department came over with her husband on the weekend? Her husband's a photographer, and he said that Virginia wants to take photos and draw. If anyone becomes an academic in our family, it'll be Maureen. Why? What's wrong with her? Erica was surprised. Nothing, she's just different, Mark replied to his wife. She's smart, quick-witted. I was at a meeting, and the teacher told me that Maureen won't rest until she gets to the bottom of any question. Maureen was 10 at the time. At that moment, she realized that of the two sisters, Virginia was beautiful, and Maureen was smart. She hadn't thought about it before. Was Dad right? Well, there's nothing to be done. It's disappointing, of course, but that's life. Maureen knew how to take things as they were. She accepted it then, although she was a little hurt. Then Maureen stared at her reflection in the mirror for a long time. It seemed like everything was the same as her sisters. Well, almost. The proportions were slightly altered, and there was no longer that perfect harmony that Virginia had. Unbeknownst to herself, Maureen harbored resentment towards her younger sister. Of course, she never said anything about it aloud. She continued to behave as usual, loving her sister and helping her with her studies. But she remembered her father's words then. Remembered them forever. Studying came easily to Maureen, she excelled, read a lot. Imperceptibly, she transformed from a girl into a young woman and moved up to the 10th grade. Virginia was in the 8th grade. She studied poorly, she only got good grades because her father was respected. For the same reason, she wasn't expelled from the elite linguistics-oriented school. Virginia quickly realized that good grades would appear for her regardless of whether she put in effort or not. So she didn't bother making an effort. But she constantly flirted with boys from the older grades. Maureen suspected that Virginia didn't have any particular goal in mind, she was just honing her skills, which would be useful to her in the future. Like a kitten chasing a bow on a string, learning to be a predator. Virginia mastered the art of flirting to perfection. She knew how to flutter her eyelashes innocently, when to lean forward just enough to raise her skirt slightly. She learned to sit on a chair in a way that showcased her slender, long legs, and then coyly adjust her dress so that everyone noticed, finding it adorable and somewhat naive. And Maureen envied Virginia. She wished she could do the same, but when she tried, it all looked ridiculous. So Maureen quickly stopped trying to imitate her sister, who seemed to be born with a special talent, the talent to be a woman. Virginia's behavior sometimes scared her mother. She would sneak her mother's cosmetics and perfumes, wear makeup to school, and each time she was forced to remove it. Of course, Virginia never admitted it and insisted there was no mascara on her lashes, even though they looked like spider legs at first. Though by the 8th grade she had learned to apply mascara subtly, enhancing the expressiveness of her eyes. Erica tried to explain to her daughter that she was rushing things. Virginia, You need to focus on your studies first before you think about these things, Erica would say. They've called me to school again because you showed up with lipstick. You should be concentrating on your education. But Virginia would frown. Focus on studying. Why can't I think about beauty and studying at the same time, Mom? Why can you wear mascara and lipstick, but I can't? Virginia would innocently smile, and her mother's heart would melt at her smile. Erica adored cosmetics herself, and Mark would always buy her the best and most expensive ones. So how could they stop Virginia from using them? After all, Mark sided with his younger daughter. Erica, are you serious? When else should she experiment with makeup and dressing up if not now? When else should she do it if not during her youth? But Erica believed that Virginia was getting into trouble. Maureen, on the other hand, didn't care about cosmetics and girly stuff. She was always buried in books, preparing to go to university. Maureen wanted to become a doctor and insisted that her father shouldn't help her with her admission, she wanted to do it on her own. In school, Virginia was only interested in one thing, the drama club, where she was considered a true star. She adored the stage, unlike her studies. She would even sew her own dresses, staying up all night to ensure her outfits were perfect. Maureen acknowledged that her sister had talent. She was even given tragic roles, though she had never experienced suffering or deprivation in real life. She read her monologues about her unhappy fate so convincingly that tears welled up in everyone's eyes. Maureen asked her sister if she wanted to go to drama school, but Virginia brushed it off. Why bother? It's 5 years of schooling, and then what? Working in some local theater, she'd reply. Why so pessimistic? Maybe you'll become a famous actress, her older sister would smile. Only a few become famous, but hundreds graduate from college every year, Virginia argued. Just think about it, you're a professor. And besides, there's this whole program and endless rehearsals, dancing, singing. Why torture myself for that? And Maureen couldn't help but acknowledge her sister's logic. She always had the ability to stand firmly on her own feet and accurately assess her abilities. When Maureen entered her final year, she met Clay. Clay had been transferred to their school, his father was an ambassador in some African country and had just returned home. Clay was finishing school, and he had to adapt to the new environment after studying at the embassy school. He had a close circle of friends, a routine life. And then, a sudden move. Clay kept his distance from everyone at first, avoiding making friends, sitting alone at the back of the classroom, although he caused a sensation among the girls in the class. Tall, slender, with ash-blonde hair and slightly squinted blue eyes. His aloofness added to his appeal, giving him an air of mystery that any young girl couldn't resist. Maureen was also taken by Clay. However, Clay didn't pay any attention to her, so Maureen decided to take matters into her own hands. During break, she noticed Clay reading something under his desk. She approached him and sat down next to him. "What are you reading?" she asked. "The Divine Comedy," he reluctantly replied. "I haven't read it," the girl admitted. "Do you want to read it?" Clay offered. "Honestly, yes," Maureen confessed. "I'll give it to you when I finish reading it myself. But first, I promise to give it to Raymond, my friend. It's an interesting book. We can discuss it later," Clay nodded. "Okay," Maureen smiled. "By the way, where do you live? We can walk together if we're heading in the same direction. You always rush off after classes. Must be boring being alone." It turned out that Maureen and Clay could walk part of the way home together. Soon, it became their little tradition. Maureen liked Clay, he was smart, well-read, and intelligent, not to mention handsome. And her dad would definitely approve of him if she brought him home. A promising guy. After all, he planned to follow in his father's footsteps and become a diplomat. Maureen often thought they would make the perfect couple. She, a future doctor, could help people while he pursued diplomatic work. But, of course, she didn't say this out loud. But the prospect seemed extremely enticing to her. Maureen dreamed of an extraordinary life, vibrant and full of adventures. She loved her mother, but deep down, she slightly disdained her. How could you choose the fate of a housewife when the whole world lay before you, all paths open? Maybe she was happy with her dad, but still. And Virginia dreams of something similar. She often says she doesn't want to work at all, just marry someone as well off and accomplished as her father. Maureen sincerely didn't understand this. You could become an astronaut or a scientist, or an agronomist, or a doctor, as Maureen dreamed. Just study. But women are still drawn into the shackles of family and household chores. A relic of the past, what can you do? In a few years, no girl will dream of being a housewife because all paths will be open to them. One day, Raymond joined Maureen and Clay. Raymond was similar to his friend, equally tall and slender, but he had black hair and brown eyes. Raymond attended school on the next street. He and Clay had met playing football. They had been involved in sports since childhood. And Raymond immediately noticed Maureen's eyes. "The color is unusual," he remarked. "I've never seen anything like it." "Thanks, got them from my mom," Maureen smiled. "Dad says he fell in love with these eyes once." Maureen froze. Her words sounded like a hint or an attempt to flirt with Raymond. But he seemed not to notice. "Very beautiful. I like it. I wish I had ones like these," he said. "By the way, Raymond is an artist," Clay chuckled, "or rather, a photo artist, right, Raymond?" Raymond looked embarrassed. "Well, I'm a bit into it." It turned out that Raymond had been taking photos since he was 7. His grandfather was a photojournalist, and at home, there was a whole collection of various equipment, cameras, lenses, developing trays. Raymond dreamed of following in his grandfather's footsteps, but he wanted to shoot sports competitions. That's how the three of them became friends. They hung out together, discussed books, movies, went to the cinema. At some point, Maureen noticed tension between the boys. The lightness disappeared, and they looked at each other with strange expressions. Soon she realized the reason: it seemed both were in love with her. And this revelation astonished Maureen. Usually, everyone fell for Virginia with her flirtatiousness, her graceful features, and plump lips. And here, Maureen became part of a real love triangle. Maureen decided to test her hypothesis. She knew she needed to conduct an experiment and quickly came up with how this experiment should look. Once they were walking home from school together with Clay, and as always, they were chatting about something. Maureen decided the moment had come. "Listen, Raymond's birthday is coming up," she said with a smile. "I thought I'd take him to the movies and then to a cafe. What do you think of the idea? You two, together?" Clay asked sharply and surprisedly. Maureen noted this change to herself and nodded. "Yes, together. What's wrong with that? We're friends, and I want to make him happy." "I see," Clay replied dryly, "but you know, I wouldn't do it." "Why not?" Maureen asked. "Well, you see, it looks a lot like a date. Who knows what Raymond will think? You're putting him in an awkward position, and yourself as well. It's better to give him something for his camera. Or let's chip in, he's been wanting a lens for a while. Or maybe some film. Let's give him something from both of us." "Well, I don't know. I wanted to do something personal." Maureen pretended to be upset, "but thanks, you're right. I'll think about it." She conducted a similar experiment with Raymond. Only she told him that Clay had invited her to go ice skating. Together? Raymond raised an eyebrow. "I wanted to go too. Can I join you?" "Well, I don't know. We need to ask Clay." Maureen shrugged. "He said we'd go together." Raymond frowned. "So, is it a date for you guys?" "A date?" "No," the girl laughed, "we're just friends." Relief spread across Raymond's face. "Ah, so they're jealous after all. Both are jealous of each other." That's where the tension comes from when they hang out together, she thought. Maureen realized she had to resolve this situation as a girl. She had to explain that there could be nothing between them except a strong friendship, that she wasn't thinking about family or marriage yet. She needed to finish college first. But for some reason, she really wanted this to last longer. She wanted to feel loved by two handsome boys, the ones all the girls at school were crushing on. And they fell for her, for the unassuming but intelligent Maureen. It was because she was smart, because she had a rich inner world. No mascara needed. She didn't want to admit to herself that she was enjoying the situation. But she did provoke jealousy in the boys, allegedly accidentally, and she enjoyed the effect. One winter day, Maureen invited Clay and Raymond over. She invited the boys today not just because her parents would be home, they would see her with these boys. Maybe Dad would realize he was wrong and that Maureen wasn't any worse than her younger sister Virginia, that someone could fall for her too. Virginia herself ran off to the ice rink with her friends. All because she knew Barry would be there today. Barry, the guy from the neighboring house, whom Virginia considered handsome. She tracked when he went to the rink just to show off to him. Maureen found all this silly. But it seemed Virginia had achieved some success. She said last time he helped her up when she fell on the ice, told her she was very beautiful, and walked her home. Whatever the case, the sister was absent, and Maureen couldn't spoil it. Raymond and Vernon were initially shy around the girls' parents, especially Raymond for some reason. But then Mom made them tea, and the guys relaxed a bit. Dad, Mark, was impressed by Raymond's enthusiasm, even suggested going on a botanical expedition in the mountains with him in the summer to take some photographs. Raymond agreed, of course, if his parents allowed. Everything was going fine until Maureen heard the front door open. "Barry, you jerk!" Virginia yelled from the hallway. "Oh, it's the sister coming," Maureen said. "I'll be right back." Virginia needed to be silenced urgently. Maureen didn't want her to embarrass her in front of the boys. She got up and went to her younger sister. Virginia didn't pay the slightest attention to her sister's angry expression, she didn't care. Her hair was messy, black streaks of mascara on her cheeks. "What happened to you?" the older sister whispered. Virginia looked up at her with teary eyes. "Barry, that idiot," the girl exclaimed. "Do you know what he did? He came to the rink with some girl, held her hand, and didn't even look at me once. I fell at his feet, and he just passed by." "Virginia, we have guests." Maureen wanted to cover her sister's mouth with her hand. "So don't yell here." "Guests, you say?" Virginia sniffed. "Then I need to freshen up." The younger one took off her coat, sniffed again, and ran to the bathroom. Freshen up. Virginia's return was not part of Maureen's plan. Secretly, the older sister understood that Virginia didn't make her look very good. Would this love triangle intrigue end with Virginia snatching the boys away from Maureen? Hopefully, the younger one, as usual, would say something absurd, and the boys would immediately understand who they were dealing with because they weren't stupid. They would see Virginia as a shallow girl interested only in clothes and makeup. Even though Raymond and Clay said they would only fall for someone's soul, no one admitted that looks came first. Take their father, for example. Maureen knew her mom wasn't exactly brilliant. She read little, mostly watched romance movies. Yet, Dad chose her over a colleague, someone not conventionally attractive but smart like Mary. And Mary, by the way, had a doctoral degree and loved to read. But for some reason, she was still single. No man appreciated her inner world. Maureen returned to the kitchen. "So, what's up with her?" Dad smiled. "Didn't break anything." "No, just had a fight with someone," Maureen replied. A few minutes later, a washed and groomed Virginia appeared. She sat next to Raymond and smiled at him. "Hello. Virginia, Maureen's sister. And these are my friends, Clay and Raymond." "Oh, so you're the photographer." Virginia's smile widened. Maureen told me about you, but for some reason, didn't introduce us. I've been wanting someone to take my picture. With pleasure. Raymond's face lit up with a silly smile. Maureen felt like throwing something at him. Inner world, huh? He saw Virginia and melted immediately. And Clay couldn't take his eyes off her either. It would have been better if she had actually broken something at the ice rink and gone to the hospital. She even had time to touch up her lips in the bathroom. Just a little, almost imperceptibly, to make her face appear brighter and fresher. For some reason, Maureen felt like crying. The boys would never be captivated by her like that. Because her main strength was her intellect. And she still had to demonstrate it. But Virginia didn't need to do anything, she was born beautiful, and just showing up would grab all the attention. Maureen wasn't even listening to the conversation, she was stirring her tea and pondering how unfair this world truly was. Progress seemed to be moving forward, yet men remained the same. But Maureen couldn't just rearrange her face to make her chin a little smaller, her eyebrows a bit higher, and her eyes bigger. And then there was the situation with the older sister. In all the fairy tales, the older sister was always jealous and wicked, while the younger one was kind, beautiful, and hardworking. And her foot was always the smallest, just right for the glass slipper. The prince always ended up with the younger one, forgetting about the older sister. That's why Maureen didn't like fairy tales. An hour later, the boys left. Maureen went to wash the dishes, as it was her turn today. Her parents were in the living room, watching some TV show. Virginia peeked into the kitchen. Maureen, what's the deal with this Raymond? Raymond is just Raymond, Maureen replied glumly. He's Clay's friend. They play football together. I see, he's quite handsome, Virginia said dreamily. So, do you like him now? Well, Raymond is smart and knows how to take photos. Do you think you would really go out with me? Virginia, I don't know. He has a lot going on. He's graduating soon and will be applying to college, Maureen said, squeezing the sponge she was using to wash the dishes. Don't bother him. Are you jealous? Virginia asked, surprised. Maureen almost threw the sponge at her sister. How did she sense that? Not at all. We're just friends. Go ahead and marry him if you want, I don't care. I might just do that, Virginia laughed. And you can marry Clay. Wouldn't that be great? I don't want to. I need to study, Maureen turned off the water. You plan to stay at home all your life. Some of us want something more. Oh, don't be mad, Virginia raised her hands in mock surrender. I'm just a silly girl. I'd love to study well like you, but when I start reading a book, my thoughts drift away. I can't concentrate on anything. And I don't understand physics at all. There are letters and numbers. But you, Maureen, you're amazing, you grasp everything right away. You don't know how upset I get when Dad praises you. You get upset? Maureen was surprised. Virginia nodded. Yeah, he's never called me smart. And your awards are displayed prominently in his office, while I don't have a single certificate, not even for good behavior. That's because you talk during class, Maureen explained to her sister. Yes, I do, Virginia agreed. Maureen sighed. How could she stay mad at this silly girl? All right, Virginia. You just grew up like this. Aha. But Raymond is still kind of special. Will you invite me along when you go out with him? And Maureen had to agree. How could she refuse her sister? Of course, Maureen had no intention of actually inviting Virginia. Over the next few months, Raymond occasionally asked about Virginia and how she was doing. Maureen would reply that Virginia was doing fine, studying poorly, and only thinking about boys. She hoped this would cool Raymond's interest, but he would listen and smile dreamily, as if Virginia embodied all human virtues. This irritated Maureen to tears. Fortunately, Clay had not fallen under her sister's spell. The tension between the boys had vanished. Raymond no longer cared whether Maureen was going somewhere with Clay or not. This was hurtful. Very hurtful. At least Clay would stay by her side. A future diplomat who increasingly spoke about his plans for life. And it seemed there was a place in those plans for her, for Maureen. He even told her that they could go to Africa together. They always need doctors in the hospitals there. The conditions are tough, no one wants to work, it's hot, and there's a shortage of medicine. So you, Maureen, would be very useful there. Maureen hoped that one day he would talk about something more serious, like how she would be not only an excellent doctor but also a wonderful partner. But Clay wasn't rushing things. And this scared Maureen a little. She didn't dare bring up the topic first. For some school celebration, there was going to be a tea party. Maureen volunteered to stay behind and help with the preparations. She and a few other girls were bustling around the classroom, setting the tables. "Maureen, your sister is here." One of Maureen's classmates, a chubby girl with long braids, approached her. "Why is she here?" "She wasn't planning on coming to school," Maureen grumbled. "She said she had a stomach ache." She turned and saw Virginia. Her stomach was clearly not hurting anymore, and she had even curled her hair. Her lips, as always, were slightly tinted with red lipstick, and she hadn't forgotten to apply mascara. Maureen walked up to her younger sister. "Is your stomach better? And why aren't you with your class?" "Well, it's boring with them," Virginia frowned. "And you said you could invite guests. So I'm your guest." "See?" Virginia suddenly seemed strangely tall to Maureen. She looked down at her sister's feet. "Are you wearing Mom's shoes?" "Yeah," Virginia smiled, "she said I could." "To school? In heels that high? What if the teachers see?" "They won't," Virginia promised. "I'll hide my feet under the table and leave quickly afterward." "All right," Maureen sighed. "Help set the table, though. Everyone will be here soon, and we're not ready." Virginia got to work. Maureen noticed her sister was in high spirits. What was up with her? Soon enough, it became clear what was making Virginia so happy. The kids started coming back, and Clay brought Raymond. Someone must have told Virginia about this. Or she sensed it somehow. Virginia sat next to Maureen, Raymond, and Clay. She talked a lot and laughed loudly. Maureen felt embarrassed. Everyone was looking at them. No, there was nothing sillier than wanting to attract men. And it hurt when that desire wasn't fulfilled. It was good that Clay was more serious. But Raymond wasn't looking at Maureen at all. He had forgotten about her as soon as he saw Virginia. Then the dancing started. Maureen asked Raymond to dance. He couldn't refuse, but he gave Virginia a guilty look. He probably wanted to ask her instead. "Your sister is interesting," Raymond smiled. "So lively." "Yeah, I'd rather she be less lively. She gets a lot of notes for her behavior and can't sit still. That's actually a good thing. She's full of life." Raymond looked at Virginia, who wasn't shy and had asked Clay to dance. She even rested her head on his shoulder. Good Lord, what kind of human did their parents raise? And what's next? She even wore stockings. She tried to move around as much as possible, making her skirt fly up to reveal her slim legs and the lacy tops of her stockings. This had to be reported to their mom. "Hey, it seems like you're jealous," Raymond suddenly said. "What are you talking about?" Maureen snapped. "Sorry," Raymond smiled, "it just seems like you don't like her very much. But you're both amazing in your own ways." After the dance, Maureen stayed behind to help clean up. Clay and Raymond stayed too. Virginia hinted to Raymond that she wanted to go home quickly and, of course, wanted him to walk her home. But Raymond didn't give in. After they finished, Virginia managed to drag Raymond away. She lied, saying she had a blister on her foot and urgently needed to get home but couldn't walk there alone. Raymond left with her. Maureen couldn't understand why she felt so hurt. Maureen and Clay left the school together. "It's such nice weather," he said. "Yes, Clay, it's almost summer," she nodded, "exams are coming soon." They wandered down the road. Maureen felt tired. It had been a strange day, especially with Virginia showing up. But it was clear why. She was eager to see Raymond. "Have you thought about the future?" Clay suddenly asked. "Yes, of course," Maureen replied. "I'll finish school, then college. I want to be a surgeon. My dad supports me, he thinks I can do it. And after that? Well, then a family, work. I want kids, but later," Maureen admitted. "I want a family too. It's just hard to find the right one, you know." Clay picked a flower and handed it to her. "Here, Maureen." She took the flower and brought it to her face. It smelled sweet. "Will you keep looking?" Maureen asked, her heart suddenly beating faster. "I think I've already found her." Clay looked into her eyes, "a long time ago. It's just been really difficult." "Why?" "Well, you know, Raymond and I are friends, and for a while, we were both in love with you," he said. "We talked about it. We decided we'd both confess our feelings, and you'd choose. But then Raymond saw your sister and fell for her. She's all he talks about now." "Really? I didn't know." "So, you see, the problem solved itself. And now I want to tell you, Maureen, I want to marry you someday, if you agree, of course." "That's not very romantic," Maureen smiled. "Well, I'm a pragmatist. We'll finish school and get married. Then we'll go to Africa, but only together. How does that sound?" "It sounds great," she said, shyly looking at Clay. That evening, they walked hand in hand for the first time in their lives. The next few months were challenging. Maureen was preparing for exams, as was Clay. Virginia spent all her time with Raymond, seemingly in love with him. Maureen found herself increasingly jealous of her younger sister and missing the days when she felt loved by two guys. But there was nothing to be done about it, that's just how things turned out. However, now Maureen had a real fiancé, and his name was Clay. She hadn't told her parents yet, there was no need to rush. Anything could happen. Maureen got into college, though it cost her a lot of nerves, and she even lost a lot of weight. But she aced her exams. Clay also became a student, and Raymond got into a technical college. A new chapter in life had begun. It was more challenging but exciting. Maureen suddenly felt like an adult, even changing her style. She bought trendy pants and a couple of bright shirts. She considered cutting her hair, but her mother had a meltdown at the idea, so Maureen decided against it. Virginia was finishing high school, and dealing with her was becoming increasingly difficult. She went out a lot, wore heavy makeup, and sported very short skirts. Their mother had found cigarettes in her bag several times. Finally, Virginia passed her final exams, and the question of her future education arose. Their father insisted on journalism, why not? With her looks, Virginia might become a TV presenter. But she refused college, announcing she wanted to become a hairdresser. She made this declaration during a family dinner celebrating her graduation. Their mother nearly dropped her fork. "Virginia, a hairdresser," their mother exclaimed. "So what? I like fashion, Mom. And I enjoy doing hairstyles, it's not hard," Virginia replied calmly. "Sweetie, think about it," her father said gently. "You still have time. With your grades, you could get into any college." He winked at her. "Dad, they only gave me those grades because you're a professor." "I get it," Virginia smiled. "Do you think I don't know?" "No, that's not for me. I want to be a hairdresser." "Do you know how much they earn?" "If it's about money, your mom and I can help you." "Don't we give you enough?" her father asked, surprised. No, but I want to be independent, she frowned. And I've made up my mind. Even their mother's tears didn't sway Virginia. Maureen understood why her sister made this choice. She really was a bit simple-minded. Was Raymond really planning to marry her? They had already told their parents. She would get pregnant and forget about school. There was only one problem, the apartment. Their father, Mark, had long wanted to sell their luxurious apartment and buy two smaller ones, arguing that it would provide a good inheritance for their daughters. He thought they needed to consider this now. Think about it, dear. Both will get married, and no one knows how life will turn out. This way, they will have their own place. His wife didn't like this idea, she loved their apartment and didn't want to part with it. But Mark insisted, and Erica gave in. They decided not to rush, though, there was time to find the best and most advantageous option. But Raymond wasn't happy about this. He once told Maureen directly. Maureen, it's humiliating to live in my wife's apartment. I want to achieve everything on my own. Raymond, when will you earn enough for an apartment? You're still a student. Right now, you have a good apartment. Dad even promised to furnish it. No, I don't want that, Raymond frowned. I'd feel awful. Why? If parents can help, why not take advantage of it? What's the problem? No, Maureen, we'll do it on our own. And Virginia agrees with me. Raymond, Virginia is naive, Maureen blurted out. Everything has always been easy for her. She thinks you'll get a job, and you'll immediately have an apartment just like ours. She doesn't understand anything about real life. Maureen, listen, you're being unfair to your sister, Raymond frowned. She understands a lot, just in her own way. She gets why I want this. Maybe I'll become a photojournalist, and then things will move faster. I'm already taking photos for our college newspaper. Maureen didn't try to convince him otherwise. If they wanted to struggle, they would struggle. It was strange to refuse a gift like an apartment. But Raymond had always been stubborn and wanted to prove something to someone, perhaps because he felt inferior to his friends. It was understandable. Raymond lived in a tiny apartment with his parents. His family was poor, and his father was an alcoholic. Maureen felt sorry for him and sometimes thought it would have been better if he had chosen her instead of Virginia. Maybe she could have explained to him that he was wrong. But Maureen loved Clay. She envisioned her future with him. Their future was clear and straightforward. They would work, contribute to their country, use their talents, and start a family. Clay wanted one child, while Maureen wanted two. Time flew by quickly. Maureen felt like she blinked, and suddenly she was in her 5th year of college. Virginia had finished her training as a hairdresser. She practiced hairstyles from fashion magazines on her friends, did their makeup, and matched outfits from her extensive wardrobe. She did it with such a serious demeanor that it made Maureen laugh. It wasn't really that important. Hairstyles fall apart, makeup washes off, and it all takes so much time. Maureen's profession, on the other hand, allowed her to wear a serious face because she would be saving lives. Unlike those for whom appearance was everything. Virginia got a job at a top-tier salon in the city center. It was one of the best, and they only hired people with extensive experience. Maureen didn't believe they would hire her younger sister. But Virginia gave it a try, and within a week, she was styling hair there. Maureen felt a twinge of jealousy. Clay graduated from college, and his diploma was celebrated in grand style. They rented a hall in a restaurant. Maureen even bought her first evening gown. Her mother insisted, it was time to get used to a new lifestyle. When Clay became a diplomat, she would often attend such events. That evening, Maureen tried on the dress in front of the mirror, and it looked quite good. It had a fitted bodice, a long flowing skirt made of golden fabric, and puffed sleeves. The dress highlighted her complexion, and her eyes looked as bright as the spring sky. "You look gorgeous," her sister said, peeking into the room. It really suits you. Yes, but it feels strange, Maureen smiled. But you're right, it does look nice. What about your hair? Virginia frowned. Have you thought of anything? I'll just leave it down, Maureen shrugged. Just leave it down. Are you crazy? With that dress? What should I do, Virginia? Wait a minute. Virginia squinted. Maureen, I've been wanting to suggest a short haircut with the ends turned inward. It's complicated, but I can do it. Do you want to try? Maureen touched her hair. She usually wore it in a braid or ponytail. Her braid was long, almost to her waist. All right, let's do it, the older sister laughed. I'm ready. Virginia practically jumped for joy. Awesome, Maureen. I'll style it so well that you'll outshine all those diplomats. It'll be fashionable and modern, I promise. Within 2 hours, Maureen looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the reflection. Her chin seemed more defined, and her cheeks had slimmed down. She looked like a movie star or a singer at an award ceremony. Virginia admired her handiwork with her sister. Now that's more like it. Clay is going to faint, she said. You know, Virginia, it's no wonder they hired you, Maureen replied. It seems you really do have some talent. Of course, I do, Virginia nodded. You should have believed in me. I did and I do, what are you talking about? Maureen countered. No, Virginia smiled. You don't really believe in me, but I don't mind. We're just very different. But I still love you very much. At the celebration, Maureen found herself the center of attention for the first time in her life. Girls approached her, asking where she got her haircut. Maureen proudly told them it was her sister's work. It was a wonderful evening, one of the best in Maureen's life. She felt stunningly beautiful. And Clay looked at her with love in his eyes. They danced, and Maureen was sure that everything would only get better and her life would be extraordinary, filled with adventures, love, and happiness. But soon, that confidence vanished. Clay's family was struck by a series of misfortunes. His father was first suspended from teaching at the university and then sent to jail for accepting a bribe. Clay didn't want to talk about it, and Maureen understood. He knew something. Later, Clay told her that he and his mother needed to leave. They met in a cafe, it was winter, and it was snowing. Where to? And how long will you be gone? Maureen exclaimed. To a village in the west, where my mother's relatives live, Clay replied. Maureen, it's very serious. I'm not sure if we'll come back. What? Maureen couldn't believe her ears. Maureen, it's all very unpleasant. But it happened. We're losing the apartment because of debts, we have nowhere to live. They've taken everything, Maureen. We have nothing left. No one will hire me. Do you understand? And all because my father wanted to live well. So, Maureen faltered, so it's true, and there was a bribe? I don't want to talk about it, he waved it off. Just know that we have to leave. I want to ask, will you come with me? Clay, But I need to finish college, Maureen said quietly. And my parents. I understand, he nodded briefly. Goodbye. I won't ruin your life. He stood up and walked out. Maureen watched Clay leave. She realized that she didn't want to follow him. This realization was even harder to accept than his words. It meant she didn't truly love him. She wasn't willing to leave her city and college for him. But if you love someone, you're supposed to be willing to sacrifice everything, right? Maureen wanted to cry but held back her tears. She had never liked crying, even as a child, considering it a sign of weakness. Maureen didn't explain anything to her parents, they already knew about Clay's father and probably understood everything. Clay disappeared from her life, leaving a void. Everything seemed the same, yet something was missing. Maureen filled this emptiness with her studies, preparing for exams, spending all her time at the hospital. But the void remained. And then there was Virginia. All she could talk about was her Raymond. How talented he was, how smart, how his work was being published in newspapers. And soon, Raymond would become a famous photographer. Maureen felt a pang of jealousy towards her younger sister again. Why did everything come so easily to that airhead? Just because she was beautiful? Sometimes Maureen felt she hated Virginia. But Virginia didn't notice, always smiling, talking about her job, about how wonderful Raymond was, and how lucky she was to have him. Maureen often reminisced about the times when she wasn't in a relationship with Clay, and Raymond wasn't with Virginia. Maybe she should have been more proactive. Now, it seemed like she liked Raymond a bit more than Clay. It was unfair. All because Virginia had barged in with her high heels, eyelashes, and silly, misplaced coquettishness. One day, Maureen's younger sister announced that the wedding would be in 6 months. This news hit Maureen hard. If Raymond and Virginia got married, Maureen would lose any chance of winning Raymond over from her younger sister. She tried to push these thoughts away, as they made her feel like a terrible person. But they wouldn't disappear. Maureen believed she should be in Virginia's place. Raymond was deep, intelligent, and creative. He had even had an exhibition of his works at his office, and his landscape photography was outstanding. Could it be that Raymond would end up with her foolish younger sister, who couldn't truly appreciate his work and only knew how to cut hair? Maureen would never deliberately interfere in Virginia and Raymond's relationship. But then, an opportunity presented itself. Raymond waited for Maureen outside her college. He looked gloomy and dejected. She said goodbye to her friends and quickly walked over to him. "Hi, Raymond." "Hi," he replied, looking at her. "Can we talk?" "Yes, of course." "What happened? Do you want my help picking out a ring?" "I don't know if I'll need it," he answered darkly. "What do you mean?" "We had a fight," he shrugged. "A serious one." "I don't know what to do now." "Well, if you want, we can talk about it," Maureen offered. Raymond perked up. "Thank you. You're her sister, after all. The older one, who knows her better. It's all about the apartment, Maureen. I thought it might be worth accepting the gift from your parents." "That's the right decision," Maureen nodded. "Dad has already found several good options in the city center. But I feel awkward about it." "You were right, Maureen, it would take too long to get our own place. And living with my parents isn't an option. My father is always drunk, and there's no space. And I can't live with your parents, it's just not right. I like your parents, but it feels inappropriate. So, what does Virginia think?" "Virginia says we need to earn everything ourselves. Yesterday she called me a wimp, she's never done that before." Maureen nodded. Yes, yesterday Virginia had come home looking gloomy, not chattering as usual. She went to her room and shut the door, saying she had a headache. "Listen, maybe you could talk to her. I've called your place, but she hangs up when she hears it's me. Don't worry, she'll get over it." "Maureen, we've never fought like this before," Raymond rubbed his stubbly chin. "I don't understand what's gotten into her." "All right, I'll try to talk to her." "Don't worry," she smiled. They said their goodbyes. As Maureen walked home, she thought about what to do. She could certainly convince her sister that Raymond was right. Then Virginia would get both Raymond and the apartment in the city center. But what if she did something else? Yes, it would be a bad thing to do, but Virginia and Raymond really weren't a good match. They didn't understand each other. How long could they live together? It's good now when they're just dating, but living together is different. Her father loved her mother unconditionally. Or at least, he used to. Maureen often felt that her parents were bored with each other. Her mother was truly a bit simple-minded, which was clearly where Virginia got it from. Maureen loved her mother, of course, but as she grew older, she couldn't help but notice her mother's limited interests, poor vocabulary, and lack of hobbies. Her father had nothing to talk about with her. This was the same fate that awaited Raymond with Virginia. But if Raymond were with Maureen, he would be engaged and interested. Plus, with Virginia's looks, she'd easily find another husband. It was impossible to walk down the street with her without someone trying to get to know her. That's why Maureen tried to go out with her sister as little as possible. People paid attention to Virginia, and Maureen felt invisible next to her, once again wondering why fate had been so unfair, not endowing her with the same radiant beauty. Maureen struggled with her decision for a long time. She even walked around the block several times before going home. Finally, she understood what she wanted. Maybe it wasn't right, but as her father often said, the right decision only exists in science. Life isn't science, it's something else. Life is about choices and the responsibility that comes with them. And Maureen was ready to take that responsibility. Her younger sister was at home, sitting in her room and looking through a fashion magazine. Maureen walked in and sat on the couch. "Virginia?" Her sister looked at Maureen with sad eyes. "What? Do you need a new hairstyle?" "No, it's not about that. How are you feeling?" "Fine, and you?" "I'm okay too." "Lots of classes," Maureen sighed. "I feel like I'm going to lose my mind before I get my degree." "Don't worry, you'll manage," Virginia smiled. "You're smart, and I believe in you." Maureen felt a pang in her heart. Maybe she was doing the wrong thing. "Listen, Virginia, that's not what I wanted to talk about. Raymond stopped by earlier." "Raymond?" Virginia perked up. "What did he say?" Maureen took a deep breath. She felt as if she were about to dive into icy water, knowing it would engulf her, fill her lungs, and prevent her from taking another breath. Should it feel this way if she were doing the right thing? "Raymond said there won't be a wedding." "What? What do you mean?" "He couldn't bring himself to tell you. He thinks it's too soon. He needs freedom." "What?" Virginia shook her head. "That can't be. We had a fight recently, maybe that's why he's saying this." "Yes, he told me it was about the apartment." "Virginia, I didn't want to tell you, but I ran into him when I was coming back from college, and he wasn't alone." Virginia looked at her sister with wide eyes. Maureen felt a pang of shame, but there was no turning back. Virginia would be fine without Raymond. She'd find her happiness, she was beautiful. But without him. "Virginia, he was with another girl. I thought she was just a friend, but they were kissing at the bus stop. I saw them. I decided to tell you. It's better to know the truth, right? Even if it's unpleasant." Virginia froze, as if turned into a statue. Then she jumped up, sat on the couch next to Maureen, and clung to her like a child. Virginia was shaking. Maureen embraced her shoulders. "It's okay, they needed to get through this. It's better to face it now. They weren't meant for each other anyway." Later, the breakup would be much harder for Virginia. And what if they had a child? No. Maureen was doing the right thing. She was saving two people from a rash decision. How could he? Virginia sobbed. "He recently said he loved me." "They're all like that," Maureen stroked Virginia's back. "Well, almost all. It's a good thing he didn't leave you pregnant." "What if he had?" Maureen spoke as if comforting herself. There was no turning back. She simply helped fate along, nudging events in the right, logical direction. Then Maureen called Raymond and asked him to meet. She told him Virginia didn't want to see him anymore. "Raymond, I think it was just an excuse," Maureen said. "All this stuff with the apartment. She had another guy, you know. She'd come home with flowers, he'd walk her to the door. I saw them standing outside the entrance." "Now it all makes sense to me," Raymond replied softly. His eyes grew even darker and turned black. I didn't understand what she saw in me at all. She's such an incredible girl. And with me. Turns out, I wasn't mistaken. I'm sorry, please forgive me for talking about your sister like that. Maureen patted Raymond's hand. I understand everything. I love her, but she's always been flighty. Raymond, do you want to go somewhere, talk? Virginia took a long time to recover, crying a lot. Dad bought her a vacation by the sea, and Virginia left with her friend for a whole month. Maureen saw it as a sign. The universe itself was helping her implement her plans. So, everything was right. It meant it wasn't fate for those two to be together. And Maureen began to act. She comforted Raymond, spent a lot of time with him. They often reminisced about carefree days in school when there were three of them. Maureen, Raymond, and Clay. Listen, were you ever in love with me? Maureen asked one day. What, did Clay tell you? Raymond smiled. Yes, I was. You know, sometimes it seems, even now. Still. Virginia looked so much like you, and that solved the problem. With Clay, it was so hard to communicate, we both understood everything perfectly. And we didn't know whom you'd choose. The worst thing that can happen to friends is falling in love with the same girl, you know. Raymond, you and Virginia really aren't right for each other, forgive me, Maureen said. Raymond didn't say anything, just furrowed his brows and turned away. The girl chose the right tactic. 6 months later, Raymond proposed to her, and Maureen said yes. It was unclear how to tell her parents and Virginia about it. Maureen announced the wedding over dinner. Mom stared at her with a surprised look. Dad immediately looked at Virginia, and Maureen felt bitter. Oh, they worried about the younger daughter first. And Virginia froze. It seemed like she even stopped breathing. And then she got up and left the table. Sweetheart. Wait, what's going on? Why? Mom asked. She's your sister. Mom, things happen, Maureen replied, her voice trembling with offense and tension. Raymond and I love each other. Don't I deserve happiness, Mom? Well, not at such a cost, Mother whispered. Dad, what do you think? Maureen asked. Mark shook his head. We'll buy you an apartment, and you'll live separately. Is that all, Dad? What more do you want from me? Maureen, I always thought you were a smart girl. But this decision. Maureen also left the table. If Virginia had stolen her fiancé, no one would have said a word to her, wouldn't have judged her, on the contrary, they would have been happy that everything turned out so well for the younger daughter. But nothing, they'll get used to it. And Virginia will get used to it too. If they loved each other, they would have found a way to talk. Maureen did everything right. Just as it should be. Maureen and Raymond got married. Virginia came to her older sister's wedding swollen, unhappy. Even her eyes, turquoise, seemed faded, turned gray. Raymond couldn't take his eyes off her, and Virginia seemed to be looking inward, as if the world had stopped existing for her. Maureen felt sorry for her sister at first. She even doubted whether she had done the right thing. But pity quickly turned to annoyance. She could have just not come instead of sitting with such a face at the celebration. Dad bought Maureen and Raymond a one-bedroom apartment in the city center. Apparently, the two-bedroom apartment was intended for Virginia, as the aggrieved party. Maureen's marriage didn't bring happiness. Raymond worked a lot, traveled around the country, filming events. He spent weekends out of town, looking for beautiful landscapes. Maureen never admitted to anyone, ever, that they never really became husband and wife. They shared a bed only for the first 3 months, then Raymond, without explanation, moved to the couch. Maureen asked him why he did that, but Raymond just shrugged. I'm not used to sleeping with someone. Otherwise, I can't get enough sleep. And 2 years later, they divorced. Raymond simply said he had met someone else. Maureen quickly figured out who broke up their family. Margaret. The daughter of some official. And then Raymond went abroad altogether. Maureen waited a year, then remembered Clay. She contacted him and found out that he was married and raising a daughter. She hoped he would at least invite her over, but Clay didn't even hint that he would like to meet Maureen. Maureen's sister also got married. Dad picked out a groom for her, a graduate student from the botany department. He just brought him home, introduced him, and then told his younger daughter that he would like her to start her family life. Virginia obediently complied. Her husband's name was Donald. A good guy, kind. And it seems he really loved Virginia. Did she love him? Maureen didn't know. And then their parents died. First, Dad. He had a heart attack right at the university during a lecture. Then Mom followed. She survived Mark by only a year and 3 months. Maybe she really loved Dad. Maureen didn't speak to her sister anymore. She tried to mend their relationship somehow, but Virginia hung up when she heard her sister's voice. And Maureen threw herself into her work. She excelled, even managed a department for a while and married a colleague, but divorced after 5 years, unable to withstand constant infidelity. She wanted to have a child but couldn't. She had 3 miscarriages. And then she was even forbidden to try to conceive. During the last miscarriage, she had such heavy bleeding that she barely made it. She didn't know if fate was punishing her for a mistake or if God simply didn't give her luck. Maureen devoted herself to work, retired, and lived a lonely, peaceful life. She only had one outlet, communication with Raymond. She sometimes wrote to him, and he wrote back. Maureen herself didn't know why he forgave her. Or just felt sorry for her. She didn't care. These letters were a kind of indulgence for her, and they gave hope that Virginia would eventually forgive her older sister. Maureen finished her story, and a silence fell in the room. "I don't even know what to say," Nadine finally said softly. "Everyone makes mistakes." "Yes, of course, everyone does," Maureen nodded. "I just made them too often. Though I've saved many lives, taken on hopeless cases, and helped people get back on their feet. Now I believe in God. I hope He'll forgive me." "Of course, He will," Nadine nodded. "I feel sorry for you, Virginia, Raymond, and Clay." "Well, as for Raymond, he lived a good life." Maureen ran her palm over the photo album lying on the table and smiled. "And Clay's life turned out well too. His father was released, and he returned to the family. Clay became a writer. Have you read The Detective with an Eye Patch? Funny books, they sell everywhere. I've seen them, but the author isn't Clay, I think." "That's a pseudonym," the elderly woman chuckled. "At first, he was published in magazines, wrote all sorts of articles, and then started composing detective stories. His daughter is in Australia, she studied there, and then moved there, and Clay still lives with his wife in that village. I should have gone after him then, but I was afraid. How could I just leave my apartment, parents, college?" Nadine looked away. For some reason, she felt ashamed of her relationship with Seth. She convinces herself that she only needs him to have a good time. She treats him coldly, joking sometimes offensively. Seth came to mind at the wrong time. After all, it had nothing to do with Maureen's story. "Listen, how is your sister Virginia doing?" Nadine asked. "Oh, I know very little about my sister. I saw her last at Mom's funeral. She was with her husband, Donald. But she didn't even come up to me. I can understand her, actually. I don't know what came over me then. It seemed so unfair, as if she got him, as if she took Raymond away from me. So, I decided to get him back. I should have helped them reconcile after all. But what's done is done. I know she's been working at that salon all her life. I think she has a son. She divorced Donald, by the way. She had her son late, she was already over 30 after the divorce. I don't even know who the father is. You see, that's how we ended up alone and unhappy. Nadine didn't know what to say to her. She felt unbearable pity for Raymond and Clay, and the sisters. Listen, Raymond left you both an inheritance, and he probably wanted you to talk to Virginia yourselves and split it in half. Well, or not in half, the woman brightened up. Maybe go see her. Try to talk. Maureen looked at Nadine. I've wanted to go see her for a long time, for several years now. I even came to her house once. I sat at the entrance, but then I went back. I'm afraid to look her in the eye. Maybe you're right. Yes, of course, I'm right, Nadine smiled. And the album and the box. They should belong to both of you, understand? These are shared memories. Yes, you're absolutely right, Maureen clenched her dry hands into fists. If she tells me to go to hell, so be it, but at least I'll try. So let's go right now. Nadine said. Let's go. You need to change. We'll pick out something. Maureen looked at Nadine in fear. Right now? Maybe tomorrow. I'm working tomorrow, Nadine said. We're going together, and right now. That's it. An hour later, Maureen was ready. Nadine picked out a gray, strict suit for her. Maureen mentioned she bought it over 20 years ago, and Nadine envied her a bit. Some people just don't gain weight, lucky them. Maureen was noticeably nervous. Oh, I don't know how she'll receive me. I wouldn't even bother talking, she might not even let me in the door. Oh, come on, it's been many years, Nadine remarked. And if she doesn't want to talk, we'll try again later, and then again. Oh, you never give up, Maureen grumbled. Call a cab, dear, or I might lose my resolve. Half an hour later, they stepped out of the taxi. Virginia lived downtown. Nadine guessed her apartment must cost a fortune. All she could do was be happy for Virginia's son, inheriting such a treasure. For some reason, Nadine became curious about him. He must have been Virginia's pride and joy. Beloved children either grow up to be bright, kind individuals, or complete egotists. Fifth floor. Maureen nervously adjusted her jacket. Oh, Nadine, you know, I'm starting to feel reluctant to go up to her. We have to. Nadine took Maureen's hand. Let's go. The girl threw the bag with the photo album over her shoulder, and they headed to the entrance. Maureen couldn't bring herself to press the doorbell. So, Nadine had to take on that mission. A couple of minutes later, the door opened, and Nadine saw an elderly woman with eyes the same shade of blue as Maureen's. It seemed this woman had been very beautiful in her youth. Her face was covered with tiny wrinkles, but Virginia was lucky, she looked to be about 50 years old. That is, if you didn't scrutinize too closely. Maureen? Virginia asked. Nadine was surprised. She immediately recognized her sister. Yes, Maureen coughed, I had to come, forgive me. Raymond passed away. The apartment's owner froze, then pressed her hands to her chest. I felt it, you know. I had a dream, such a good one. We were sitting on the bench in the park, at our spot. And he said it was time for him to go. He got up and walked away, so slowly, without looking back. And I didn't even feel sad, it was like I knew that I would follow him, but it's still too early for me to go. Virginia fell silent. A tear rolled down her cheek. The sisters looked at each other, and Nadine felt out of place. Then Maureen took a step and hugged her younger sister. Virginia stood frozen for a moment, then rested her head on Maureen's shoulder. Nadine wiped away a tear. Lord, how many years had they not seen each other? Over 30, it turns out. Finally, Maureen and Virginia let go of each other. Is this your daughter? Virginia asked, nodding at Nadine. No, just a nice girl who helps me out. Virginia nodded approvingly. I can see she's nice. I would have liked such a daughter-in-law. The woman suddenly winked at Nadine, leaving her thoroughly confused. But why? Nadine asked. I can see you're nice. I would introduce you, but my son has some girl, and he loves her very much. But she doesn't want to get to know me. Oh well. Please, come in. Virginia led Nadine and Maureen into the kitchen and made tea. Nadine was surprised to see that the kitchen was equipped with all the latest appliances, a stove, an electric kettle, and even an air fryer. Usually, older people aren't keen on embracing such novelties, but Virginia seemed to be an exception to the rule. Nadine felt strange. She had expected Virginia to drive them away, to cry and accuse Maureen of once ruining her life. But none of that happened. It was as if they had seen each other just a week ago. Virginia poured tea for Maureen, who smiled at her sister. It made Nadine wonder if Virginia could see the change in Maureen or if they still saw each other as the same young girls they once were. So, how have you been? Maureen asked. What's been happening with you? Oh, I've been living, Virginia smiled. Nothing special. Not quite as planned, of course, but I don't regret a thing, sis. After Maureen and Raymond got married, Virginia struggled for a long time to come to terms with it. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her feet. Life, which had seemed like a pleasant, easy stroll before, turned out to be a challenging trek. Everywhere were rocks, cliffs, and impenetrable thickets, but she had to keep moving, no matter the cost. And she did move, working hard, gaining some popularity. Politicians' wives came to her, even movie stars. She had a knack for it, and people trusted her. They said she was the kind of stylist you just had to sit in the chair and tell her to do what she thought was best. Yet, Virginia missed Raymond terribly. She missed him desperately. She continued to love him with all her heart, a love so deep that just the thought of him made it hard to breathe. She couldn't understand why he left her. Was it because of that silly argument, because of the apartment? Yes, they hardly ever fought before. But was that reason enough? And when Maureen married Raymond, Virginia felt like she died. She felt dead, yet she continued to live, work, and even smile. But life and youth had their way of thawing things out, and gradually, the numbness subsided. Virginia thawed, like the earth after a long winter. But she didn't want to communicate with her sister. She imagined their meeting and realized she wouldn't be able to handle it. She would think about how happy Maureen and Raymond were, how Maureen hugged and kissed him, how they woke up together in the mornings, doing all the things Virginia had dreamed of doing with Raymond herself, and these thoughts caused her unbearable pain. But when she distracted herself, she felt a little better. Then her father found her a husband. Virginia liked Donald. He didn't hold a candle to Raymond, of course, but maybe it was better not to love anyone at all. Donald was kind, generous, and smart. He was predicted to have a bright future in science, being one of her father's best students. Mark married Donald to his daughter. Virginia found it amusing. She honestly told Donald that she didn't love him a month before the wedding. I know, he smiled. Your father told me your fiancé left you, but I'll try to win your love, Virginia. And if it doesn't work out, I won't hurt you. And I promise to try to be a good wife to you, she replied. And I'll try to love you. Their parents arranged a lavish wedding for them. Virginia understood that her father wanted to cheer up his youngest daughter. His unhappy and lost one. The restaurant, the expensive dress, hundreds of guests. Virginia pretended to be happy so convincingly that she almost believed she was happy herself. A new life began for her. Donald really was a good husband. He made her laugh, gave her gifts, and showed interest in her work. Maybe she could have truly loved him. But one day, fate intervened. In the morning, while showering, Virginia noticed a small lump in her breast. She didn't pay much attention to it, perhaps it seemed insignificant. Besides, she had to rush to work. She forgot about the strange little lump. It was 3 months later when her breast began to ache that she finally went to see a doctor. After tests and examinations, she received a terrible piece of news. It's cancer. You need surgery urgently. Her father nearly went insane at the time. He rallied the entire town and found the best doctors for his daughter. Virginia asked him not to tell Maureen anything. She didn't want to see her sister in the hospital room. The surgery went well, and Virginia's life was not in danger. However, her breast had to be removed. It was the most terrifying experience for the young woman. She couldn't bear to look at herself in the mirror. She would burst into tears immediately. Accepting herself in her new body was impossible. Donald couldn't accept it either. He begged Virginia for forgiveness for a long time. "I'm sorry, I really can't," he pleaded. Virginia didn't hold any anger towards her husband. He had been there for her during her treatment, stayed by her bedside, bought her favorite sweets and fruits to cheer her up, visited her every day. He pitied her and even loved her in his own way, but she wasn't the wife he needed. And there was nothing he could do about it. She let him go easily, even thanked him for the good years they had and for supporting her while the doctors fought for Virginia's life. After her parents' death, Virginia was left alone. Suddenly, she realized she had no friends, only colleagues and work. Nothing more. Nobody was waiting for her at home, nobody invited her to spend weekends together. She got herself a cat and decided to live like that. She didn't want a family, although she often thought about having a child. It would have been wonderful to have a son or daughter. She could have managed to raise them alone. She had money, a good salary, and satisfied clients who paid generous tips. She could afford to hire a nanny, and she still had love she hadn't given to anyone. Love demanded an outlet. But there was no man she wanted to have a child with. Sure, admirers appeared regularly, but it was never right. There wasn't the one whose eyes Virginia wanted to see in her baby. The 90s came. Changes pleased the woman. She understood that hard times lay ahead, but she liked the new spirit of freedom. And then she met Raymond. Or rather, he met her. Virginia left work, and he was standing near the beauty shop. "Raymond?" He smiled. "Virginia, hey. I missed you." Raymond had changed. He had matured, acquired wrinkles, one on his forehead and two around his mouth. But they didn't detract from his appearance. On the contrary, he seemed even more handsome. "Are you here permanently?" "No, just for a while. Mom got sick, and I want to take her with me." "She's resisting," he smiled sadly. "She's been diagnosed with diabetes." "That's too bad, Raymond. Listen, are you married?" The question slipped out of Virginia unexpectedly. She nervously covered her mouth with her hand, and Raymond laughed. "I was until recently. Shall we go somewhere to sit down? Or are you in a hurry to get home, to family?" "No, I'm not married, no children," she said. "Let's go to our cafe. It's still open, can you believe it?" Soon, they were sitting at the table as before, sipping coffee. Virginia looked at Raymond and smiled. The resentment had vanished, and the pain was gone. There was joy in their meeting and a sense of its fleetingness, as if Virginia had known in advance that he wouldn't stay forever. And she understood that she needed to cherish every moment. She had never loved anyone like Raymond. And she would never love anyone else more. The man told her about his life. He married Margaret very quickly. He didn't understand how it happened. Margaret was an active, loud, confident girl. Not pretty, but she knew how to present herself. They met at some event Raymond was photographing. Margaret caught his eye immediately. She was swift as lightning, reminding Raymond of a drop of mercury. It seemed like an atomic reactor was contained in her fragile body. She did everything quickly. There was no point in resisting her pressure. Raymond didn't resist, he didn't know how, and he couldn't bear to be alone at the time. And Margaret? She filled his life immediately, quickly becoming its center, meaning, and leader. Thanks to her, Raymond got a job at one of the city's largest publications, becoming a staff photojournalist. And then she said they were leaving. Wait, where to? Raymond was stunned. To Europe, Margaret smiled. So, I mean, how's that? Well, we're young, we need to travel, Margaret replied. And maybe we'll move there permanently afterward. You'll easily find yourself, and so will I. Raymond gave in then. And soon they found themselves in Italy. They bought a small house, and Raymond took many photographs, which the public loved. His landscapes and portraits were published in the press. Suddenly, the man realized that he liked the relaxed life. Everything was different here. And the people were different. They smiled often, talked loudly, and seemed to fear nothing. Raymond only missed his parents. And Virginia. But what about Maureen? He often thought about her actions. He guessed that Maureen was the reason for his separation from Virginia. He didn't understand how exactly, but he knew he was right. Yet, for some reason, he couldn't stop respecting her, and he wasn't even angry. They started corresponding. He couldn't write to Virginia, he was afraid. But it was easier with Maureen. She even confessed to him that she had deceived him. Raymond lied, saying he wasn't upset. Although, perhaps he wasn't lying. There was no resentment. There was bitterness from how things turned out. From the fact that he never gathered the courage to talk to Virginia, whom he still seemed to love. He and Margaret had a son, whom they named Albert. It became the happiest event of Raymond's life. He adored his son. But he often caught himself wishing that it was Virginia instead of Margaret. And Albert should have had turquoise eyes, not gray ones. Eyes that he loved more than anything in the world. Then Margaret decided to return. But Raymond suddenly realized that he didn't want to go back, although he had once missed his homeland terribly. You don't understand, his wife screamed. Let's go back. My father has a whole fortune, he'll set us up in his company, and we'll be influential people. Don't you want that? No, Margaret, I don't, Raymond replied. I don't need any of that. I've found myself here. I want to stay here, you understand? You're a fool. You should seize opportunities while they're there. And you? You'll just sit here and take your useless photos. Do you think anyone will care about them after you die? They'll all forget about them. Raymond then looked at Margaret and suddenly realized that she had become a stranger to him. He was grateful to his wife, grateful for ending up in Italy because of her, but he didn't love her anymore, and she didn't love him. Margaret was interested in career advancement, influence, and money. The man let her go easily, they got divorced. He put her on a plane, kissed her forehead, and shook hands in farewell. And she sadly looked into his eyes then. I'm sorry our paths diverge, she said. Margaret, it just happened. We've always been different, and you know it, he replied. Yes, I know, we were, she sighed. Once I liked all of that about you. Your calmness, composure. And now? Now it seems like something has changed, Raymond. It has, the man nodded. Good luck to you. So Raymond became a bachelor again. He decided that he was unlucky with women and shouldn't even try to have serious relationships. He didn't miss Margaret, he only longed for his son, Albert. And now he had returned. Briefly. I'm sorry, Virginia said to him. And I am, the man smiled. But then again, why be sorry? Everyone's alive. Margaret seems to be doing well. She's found a new husband already. Albert calls him Dad. Raymond and Virginia spent a week together. She invited him to live in her apartment. And they lived. They lived like husband and wife. Virginia cooked breakfasts for Raymond. They had dinner together in front of the TV, took baths together, and slept in the same bed. Virginia was most afraid of how he would react to the ugly scar on her chest. She couldn't undress in front of him for a long time. I didn't warn you about something. Don't be scared, nothing threatens me anymore. She took off her robe. He looked at the scar, and the woman looked at his face. And Virginia didn't see disgust or fear. My poor girl. You're beautiful. You're still more beautiful than anyone in the world. And then Raymond left. Virginia didn't ask him to stay or take her with him because she felt he had given her what she wanted most in the world. Virginia was right. A month later, she felt the first symptoms of pregnancy. And 8 months later, she gave birth to a son, to whom she devoted her entire life. And she even felt quite happy. Maybe everything should have been different, but you can't go back to the past. Virginia firmly realized that she needed to enjoy the moment. What she had. And she had everything. A beloved job, a son, and love. Though unrealized, as if not having had time to bloom into a beautiful flower. But she and Raymond didn't have a real family. Yes, they wouldn't raise their son together, grandchildren, but seeing how the families of acquaintances fell apart, how people who once loved each other began to divide property, how they began to hate their once beloved spouses, how they cheated, Virginia thought that maybe she got the best. The tender bud of her love for Raymond would never wither. But she had a son. A son from Raymond. So everything was not in vain. Maureen squeezed her sister's hand. Can you forgive me, Virginia? I forgave you a long time ago, she smiled. At our age, it's harmful to hold a grudge, Maureen. They say it can make you sick. Virginia, it all turned out so foolish. Yes, Maureen, foolish. Nadine, well, at least you don't make our mistakes. I ask you. I won't, Nadine promised, pulling out another tissue. Why can't she calm down? The tears just keep flowing on their own. There was a knock at the door. Nadine jumped. Oh, it's probably my son, Virginia sighed, always forgetting his keys. I'll get it, Nadine jumped up, you two sit tight, catch up. Thank you, dear, Virginia nodded, Maureen, you'll get to meet your nephew, he's all grown up now. Nadine went to the corridor and turned the lock. The door swung open. Seth. Nadine gasped. Seth stood there, holding grocery bags. Hey, what are you doing here, Nadine? He blinked and set the bags on the floor. Did you decide to secretly meet my mom? You could have warned me. You're still a mysterious girl. With mom? Yeah, Nadine, with mom. My mom lives here. Seth picked up the bags and entered the hallway, but no, I'm not against it, of course, Nadine. You know I wanted you two to meet. I just didn't expect you to conspire behind my back and meet like this. Unexpected, for sure. Oh my goodness. Nadine sat on the ottoman and laughed. Seth, you won't believe what I'm about to tell you. I wouldn't have believed it myself because such coincidences just don't happen. And did you just happen to come here by accident? The man smiled. Virginia peeked into hallway. Seth, hi. This is Nadine, my sister Maureen's acquaintance. I didn't tell you much about her, but she came to visit. Now we'll all get to know each other better. Seth sank onto the second ottoman. What? How? I told you, you won't believe it. Nadine nervously chuckled. Yeah, I probably won't, Seth confirmed. Either it's some universal conspiracy, or I've gone insane. Wait, so you, Mom, don't know who Nadine is? Virginia was bewildered. No, I don't. Should I know her? Seth stood up and shook Nadine's hand. Mom, then let me introduce you to that girl I've told you so much about, the one for whom I bought that ring, which you have right now in your jewelry box. What ring? Nadine asked. And Virginia chuckled. Kids, are you joking? What jokes, Mom? Seth looked at his beloved. Wait, so that Maureen, my mom's sister. Son, there's a lot I need to tell you. Virginia approached her son and looked into his eyes. About your father. About my older sister. Nadine, can I call you my daughter? Well, wait, she hasn't agreed to marry me yet, Mom, Seth said, still looking bewildered. But no one asked me yet, Nadine said. Oh, he's scared, Virginia sighed. Let him not be afraid, Maureen emerged from the room. Seth, we're all here, family. We'll support you. Nadine looked at Maureen. Then at her younger sister, Virginia. Then at Seth. It seems the man was right. Their meeting was written in the stars. So Nadine already knew what her answer would be when Seth